Laughter. That's the first thing I remember. Not the music, not the champagne glasses clinking, not the chandeliers sparkling above me. No. The first thing I remember is the cruel, ugly laughter that filled the hall, and all of it was aimed at me. But just when I thought I couldn't take any more, everything stopped. A silence so heavy fell over the room, it crushed every mocking word they had thrown at me. And that silence was because of one man. One man who walked through the doors at the exact moment I needed him most. My name is Claire. I'm 24 years old, and I serve in the United States Army. And this story isn't just about a party. It isn't just about uniform. It's about shame. It's about pride. And it's about the moment I learned that sometimes the world gives you a witness exactly when you feel invisible. Before I take you into that hall with me, I want to say this. If you've ever been underestimated, mocked, or laughed at for who you are, then this story is for you. Stick with me until the end. And if my journey touches your heart, drop a comment below and hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this, stories of honour, pain, and redemption, deserve to be heard. It all began with an invitation. My cousin Olivia, rich, spoiled, and perfectly polished, was getting engaged. Her fiancé came from one of those families where money dripped from every smile and social status meant more than sincerity. When the invitation arrived in the mail, embossed with golden letters, my mother looked at me with hope in her eyes. She said softly, "You'll come, won't you?" And I hesitated, because I knew how my family saw me. To them, I was the soldier girl, the one who threw away her chance at college to run around in muddy boots, the one who traded pretty dresses for camouflage, the one who didn't belong in their polished world. But I didn't want to embarrass Mum, so I said yes. When the day came, I opened my closet and stared at the clothes inside. I didn't own designer gowns. I didn't own glittering jewellery. What I did have was my uniform. And I thought to myself, better to walk in wearing what I earned than to hide behind what I never had. The moment I walked into that glittering ballroom, I felt the eyes crawling over me like ants, sticky and relentless. Women in diamond necklaces whispered behind their hands. Men in tuxedos stared at me as if I was some sort of spectacle, not a guest. The room smelled like roses, champagne, and expensive perfume. And I smelled like starch, fabric, and leather boots. Olivia spotted me across the hall. Her smile froze on her face, polite but sharp, like a shard of glass. "Claire, you came," she said, her voice dripping with surprise. I forced a smile back. Wouldn't miss it. But inside, my chest was already tightening. The mockery didn't take long to start. It never does with people like that. At first, it was whispers, little sparks in the corner. "Is she wearing that?" I heard one woman say. Another giggled. "I didn't know this was a costume party." And then, the cruelest one. "Does she salute before drinking champagne?" The laughter that followed, it cut deeper than any wound I'd ever taken in training. I clenched my jaw, swallowing the fire that was rising in my throat. My hands curled into fists at my sides, but I told myself, stay calm, stay composed. You're stronger than this. But every laugh echoed in my skull like hammer blows. I thought maybe, just maybe, my family would step in. Maybe my mother or my aunts would speak up. But they didn't. They looked away. Pretended they didn't hear, pretended it wasn't happening. And then Olivia herself joined in. She raised her glass high, her voice carrying like a bell across the hall. "Everyone," she said with a smile, "a round of applause for my cousin Claire, our very own G.I. Jane." The hall erupted with laughter. My cheeks burned, my stomach twisted, my chest felt hollow. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the marble floor beneath me to open up and swallow me whole. But I stood there, frozen, the room spinning around me, as the people I grew up with laughed at the thing I was most proud of. What hurt most wasn't the jokes, it was what they didn't see. They didn't see the long nights of training. They didn't see the bruises, the sweat, the exhaustion. They didn't see the letters I wrote home when I was so homesick I could barely breathe. They didn't see the folded flags given to mothers and fathers of friends who never came home. To them, my uniform was just fabric, just a costume. But to me, it was everything. My throat tightened. I could feel the tears pressing against my eyes, but I bit them back. Soldiers don't cry in front of enemies, and in that moment, that's what they were. Not family, not friends, enemies to my dignity. And just when I thought I couldn't take another second, the doors at the far end of the hall opened. The laughter stopped. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Even the band playing in the corner seemed to hush, because walking through those doors wasn't just a man. It was a storm, a 4-star general. The sight of him hit me like a thunderclap. I had seen him once before at a ceremony on base. His presence was unforgettable. His chest lined with medals, his posture unshakable, his gaze sharp as steel. And now, here he was, walking into this glittering ballroom. The crowd parted instantly, like waves pulled back by the tide. And then, his eyes found me. For a moment, the hall disappeared. It was just me and him. He walked straight toward me. Each step echoed on the marble floor, each one making the silence in the hall heavier and heavier. The crowd held its breath. And then he stopped, just 1 foot away from me. He looked me directly in the eye, and in front of everyone, he raised his hand and saluted me. When his hand rose to his forehead, every second stretched like eternity. A salute, to me, in front of them all. My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. I'd been holding my head high all night, but in that instant, I almost broke. Not from pain, but from pride. The silence in the room was deafening. Glasses froze halfway to lips, jaws hung open. Even Olivia's smug smile shattered into confusion. And then, finally, the general spoke. His voice was deep, commanding, but somehow gentle when it landed on me. "Lieutenant," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "it is an honour." The words hit like thunder. An honour, not a joke, not a costume. An honour. I straightened my back and returned the salute, my fingers trembling, my throat closing with emotion. When I lowered my hand, I realised half the room was still staring at me in stunned silence. The other half looked away, ashamed, unable to meet my eyes. The general turned toward the crowd. His gaze swept across them like a blade, and then he said something that would burn itself into my memory forever. "You stand here, dressed in your finest," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "But this young woman here, she wears the cloth of our nation. She wears the burden you could never imagine. You mock her uniform, but it is that uniform that gives you the freedom to stand here tonight and laugh." A chill ran through the hall. I could hear the faint rustle of someone shifting uncomfortably in their seat. The general didn't stop. "I have led soldiers into battle. I have buried brothers and sisters who gave everything for this country. And when I look at her, I don't see a joke. I see courage. I see sacrifice. I see honour." Every word struck harder than the last. I caught Olivia's face in the corner of my eye. Her cheeks were red now, her perfect composure cracking as whispers began circling the hall. The friends who had laughed at me before suddenly dropped their eyes to the floor. And then he turned back to me. His expression softened. He placed a firm hand on my shoulder and said quietly, so only I could hear, "Never bow your head in a room like this. They should be bowing to you." My throat burned. I nodded, barely holding back the tears threatening to spill. But the general wasn't done. He turned back to the crowd, his voice rising again. "And one more thing. When you laugh at her, you laugh at me. When you insult her, you insult everyone who has ever served. Remember that." The words echoed against the marble walls like gunfire. And then he did something I'll never forget for as long as I live. He raised his glass, held it high in the air, and declared, "To Lieutenant Clare, a soldier, a protector, a woman of honour." For a heartbeat, the room was silent, and then slowly, awkwardly, people began raising their glasses. One by one, voices followed. "To Clare! To Clare!" But not everyone joined. Some of them lowered their eyes in shame. Others couldn't bring themselves to say it. And honestly, I didn't care. For the first time that night, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel out of place. I felt seen. The general clinked his glass softly against mine and gave me a look that said more than words ever could. Respect, solidarity, pride. The music started again, but the mood in the room had shifted. No one dared laugh at me anymore. The same people who mocked me now kept their distance, avoiding my gaze, whispering nervously as if the general's words were still echoing in their ears. I stood taller than I ever had before, but the story doesn't end there. Because the truth is, even after the general left that night, the damage had already been done. My family's silence, their betrayal, their choice to laugh with strangers instead of standing with me. That was a wound no general could heal. When I tried to leave the hall later that night, Olivia intercepted me. Her voice was sharp, her smile forced. "You just had to make a scene, didn't you?" she hissed. "You think you're better than us because you wear that uniform. You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I stared at her, disbelief flooding my chest. "Embarrassed you? Olivia, they laughed at me. You laughed at me." Her expression hardened. "Oh, come on. You chose this. You could have been in college. You could have been building a career like the rest of us. Instead, you show up like some army mascot, expecting respect you haven't earned." I froze. For a second, I couldn't even breathe. Respect I hadn't earned? The images flashed in my mind like lightning. The endless drills, the nights of exhaustion, the funerals draped in flags, the tears of mothers who would never see their sons again. And this shallow, selfish girl dared to say I hadn't earned respect. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just looked her in the eye and said quietly, "One day, Olivia, you'll understand. But by then, it'll be too late." And I walked away. That night when I finally got home, I sat on the edge of my bed still in my uniform. My boots were dusty, my chest heavy, but for the first time, I didn't regret going. Because that night I realised something important. People will mock what they don't understand. They will laugh at what makes them feel small. But when someone who truly knows the weight of sacrifice speaks truth, their laughter dies. The general didn't just silence them. He reminded me of who I am, of what I carry, and of why I should never, ever be ashamed of the cloth I wear. Because the truth is this: respect isn't given by bloodlines, or money, or polished chandeliers. Respect is earned in sweat, in sacrifice, in service. And on that night, even in a hall full of laughter and cruelty, I walked away with my head higher than ever before. So to anyone listening right now, if you've ever been mocked for being different, If you've ever been laughed at for standing by what you believe in, hold your ground. Don't lower yourself to fit their comfort, because one day the truth will walk into the room and silence them. That's what happened to me, and it's why I'll never forget the night they mocked my uniform at the party until a 4-star general walked in. I wish I could tell you that after that night everything was perfect, that my family finally respected me, that Olivia apologised, that the mocking eyes turned into proud ones. But life isn't a movie. The truth is, the morning after the party, my phone buzzed with message after message. Not congratulations, not pride, but complaints. Why did you have to draw attention to yourself like that? One relative texted. You made Olivia look bad, another said. And my favourite one of all, next time, just wear a dress like everyone else. I stared at those words on my screen, my chest heavy with disbelief. They hadn't heard a single thing the general said. Or maybe they had, but pride kept them from admitting it. For days, I carried those words like stones in my pocket, weighing me down. I'd go for runs just to burn out the anger. I'd train harder, push myself further, trying to silence the voice in my head that whispered, "They don't respect you. They never will." But then, I remembered the general's hand on my shoulder. His words, "Never bow your head in a room like this." And slowly I realised something. I'd been fighting for their approval my whole life, trying to fit into their world, trying to prove that I belonged at their tables, in their parties, in their conversations. But maybe I wasn't meant to belong there. A few weeks later, I got a letter. Not from family, from the general himself. It was handwritten, neat and precise. He thanked me for my service, reminded me again that what I wore was never something to be ashamed of, and at the bottom he added one line that brought tears to my eyes. "You carry yourself with honour, Lieutenant. Keep walking tall. This nation needs women like you." I held that letter against my chest, and for the first time in weeks, the heavy stones inside me began to crumble. But the story didn't end there, because the real test came a month later. My family invited me again, this time to Olivia's wedding rehearsal dinner. Part of me wanted to say no, to stay far, far away from their polished world, but another part of me, the soldier part of me, refused to run. So I went. And yes, I wore my uniform. When I walked in, I saw the shift instantly. Some faces softened, avoiding eye contact. Others stiffened, like they were bracing for battle. Olivia's smile was tight, forced, but she didn't dare make another public comment. I took my seat in silence, feeling the tension buzz in the air. And then, halfway through the meal, one of Olivia's friends leaned across the table. She looked at me differently than before, not mocking, but curious. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. I nodded. "What's it really like? Serving, I mean." Her question was genuine. And so, for the first time, I told them. I told them about the early mornings, the grueling runs, the drills until your body wanted to quit, but your heart wouldn't let you. I told them about the bonds you form, the kind of brotherhood and sisterhood that's deeper than blood. I told them about the moments of fear, the moments of pride, the friends I lost, the flags folded carefully into mother's arms. The table was quiet. Even Olivia listened, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. And when I finished, I said simply, "That's what this uniform means. It's not a costume. It's not a joke. It's a promise." For the first time, I didn't feel mocked. I didn't feel invisible. I felt respected, not by everyone. Olivia rolled her eyes when she thought I couldn't see. Some of the older relatives changed the subject quickly, uncomfortable with the weight of my words. But a few of them finally saw me. And that was enough. I realised that night that I wasn't there to change everyone's mind. I wasn't there to force respect out of people too stubborn to give it. I was there for the ones who were willing to listen, the ones who wanted to understand. From that moment on, I stopped chasing approval. I stopped waiting for my family's acceptance like it was oxygen. I had my own life, my own path, my own honour, and in a way, Olivia gave me a gift, because in mocking me, she showed me who she truly was. And the general, in defending me, showed me who I truly was. A soldier, a protector, a woman of honour. I never spoke to Olivia the same way again. We drifted apart, our world separating like oil and water. But strangely, I didn't feel loss. I felt freedom, because I had learned the most important lesson of my life. Respect doesn't come from bloodlines. It doesn't come from money. It doesn't come from chandeliers and fancy dinners. Respect is earned through sacrifice, through service, through walking tall when the world tries to cut you down. And from that day forward, I carried myself differently. Not because a general saluted me, but because I finally saluted myself. So, if you're listening to this right now, if you've ever been mocked for the things you hold dear, don't let their laughter define you. Don't let their silence wound you. Walk tall. Carry your truth with pride. Because one day, someone will see you. And when they do, it will silence every laugh that ever tried to break you. That's the real story of the night they mocked my uniform at the party, until a 4-star general walked in. The night of Olivia's engagement party could have broken me. It could have left me bitter, ashamed, or silent. But instead, it became the fire that pushed me forward. Because from that night on, I wasn't just serving my country. I was serving a promise to myself. A promise to never again let anyone make me feel small for what I'd earned. A month after the rehearsal dinner, our unit was called for intensive training. It wasn't combat, but it was brutal. Long marches, heavy packs, endless drills in the blistering sun. Some soldiers complained, some collapsed. And me? I carried every step with the memory of that laughter in the ballroom still echoing in my ears. I used it. Every mocking word became fuel. Every laugh became a weight on my shoulders I refused to drop. I ran faster, trained harder, pushed myself further than I thought possible. Because deep down I wanted to prove, not to them but to myself, that their laughter would never define me. One evening, after a 12-mile ruck march, I collapsed onto the dirt, sweat dripping down my face, muscles trembling. My sergeant crouched beside me, a rare softness in his eyes. "You've got fire in you, Claire," he said. "Don't lose it." I smiled, breathless, and whispered, "I won't." But fire, I would learn, burns both ways. Months later, our unit faced a crisis. We weren't deployed overseas, but we were called to respond to a massive flood that had torn through several small towns. Families were stranded, homes destroyed, entire neighbourhoods underwater. When we arrived, the air reeked of mud and desperation. I saw children clinging to rooftops, elderly neighbours huddled together with fear in their eyes. And as I waded waist-deep into the water to carry an old man to safety, I realised something. This was why I wore the uniform. Not for medals, not for parades, not for family approval, but for moments like this, when someone's world had collapsed and you were the hands that helped rebuild it. For 3 weeks, we worked day and night, hauling people out of danger, delivering food, restoring what little we could. My body was exhausted, but my heart was alive in a way I'd never felt before. And then, one night, as I was handing out supplies at a shelter, a woman grabbed my hand. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her clothes caked in mud. She whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for not laughing at us when we have nothing." The words froze me, laughing at us when we have nothing. And suddenly, I was back in that ballroom, back in the swirl of diamonds and champagne, with my family laughing at me like I was nothing. Only now, I understood. Respect is not about the people who laugh at you. It's about the people who lean on you when they have no one else. That realization changed everything for me. When we returned from the flood mission, I wrote to the general again, the same one who had walked into that hall and silenced my world. I told him what had happened, what I had learned. To my surprise, he wrote back. This time his words were simple, but they struck deep. Leadership is not about the room that mocks you. It's about the lives that trust you. Never forget that. I carried that letter in my pocket for months, and slowly I began to see my family differently. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity. They were trapped in their own small world, their own narrow definition of success. And I had stepped into something bigger. But that didn't mean the pain vanished. At Olivia's wedding, I showed up again in uniform. Some people gave polite smiles, others still avoided me. Olivia barely looked at me, her face tight as porcelain. But I didn't care anymore. Because that night, when the music played and the couples danced, a little boy, maybe 7 years old, walked up to me. He tugged on my sleeve and asked, "Are you a real soldier?" I smiled, knelt down to his level and said, Yes, I am." His eyes lit up and he whispered, "I want to be like you one day." My throat tightened, tears threatening to spill, and in that moment, surrounded by chandeliers and fake smiles, I realised something powerful. It didn't matter who laughed or who sneered or who whispered. What mattered was who I inspired. That boy would remember me. Not Olivia, not the party, not the laughter, me. And from that night on, my purpose sharpened. I threw myself into service with a new sense of mission. I mentored younger soldiers, reminding them to carry themselves with pride. I volunteered for outreach programs, visiting schools, speaking to kids about what it means to serve, what it means to carry honour even when the world doesn't understand you. And with every word I spoke, I remembered that night, that room full of laughter, that moment of silence when the general walked in, that salute that changed everything. Sometimes I still think about Olivia, about my family, about the ones who couldn't see me. And yes, it still stings. But then I remember the faces of the children we rescued in the flood, the woman who whispered thanks, the little boy at the wedding who wanted to be like me. And I realise their voices are louder. Their respect matters more. So maybe that's the lesson after all. The world will always have people who laugh at you, who mock what they don't understand. But life isn't about silencing every laugh. It's about living so boldly, so truthfully, that their laughter drowns beneath the sound of the lives you touch. That's what I carry with me now, every day, every mission, every time I pull on this uniform. I am Claire. I am a soldier. I am a protector. And no matter how loud the laughter gets, I will always walk tall. Because somewhere out there, a little boy is dreaming of being like me, and I will never let him down. Years passed, my boots grew more worn, my medals a little heavier, my body stronger, but my heart softer. I carried many memories from service, some painful, some beautiful, but there was always one night I could never shake. The night they mocked me in the ballroom, until a 4-star general walked in. For a long time, that memory burned like a scar, but over the years, it became something else. A reminder, a compass, proof that dignity is not given in gilded rooms, but carried in quiet strength. I thought I had left that world behind for good. Olivia, my relatives, the endless chatter about money and appearances, it didn't matter anymore. I had my brothers and sisters in uniform. I had the children I spoke to at schools, their eyes lighting up with hope. I had the families we helped in times of disaster, who looked at us not with judgment, but gratitude. But life has a way of circling back. One crisp autumn morning, I received a letter in the mail. At first, I thought it was another military notice, but when I opened it, my stomach clenched. It was an invitation to a funeral. Olivia's father, my uncle, had passed away suddenly. I stared at the paper for a long time. I hadn't spoken to most of that side of the family in years. Memories of their laughter, their cold eyes still lingered like shadows. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to throw the invitation away, but another part whispered that it was time. So I went. The church was grand, the pews filled with people dressed in black. The air smelled of candles and lilies. I walked in wearing my uniform, not to provoke, not to make a statement, but because it was who I was. And as soon as I stepped through the door, I felt the weight of their eyes again. But this time, I didn't flinch. Olivia was there, her face pale and drawn. She glanced at me, her expression unreadable, then turned away. I sat quietly through the service, listening to the prayers, the hymns, the soft sobbing of family members. Afterward, as people filed out, I lingered by the steps of the church. And that's when Olivia approached me. Her heels clicked softly against the stone. Her eyes, once sharp with mockery, now carried something I'd never seen before. Exhaustion. For a moment, she just stared at me. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "You still wear it?" I nodded. "Always." She looked down, her hands trembling slightly. "I never understood," she admitted. "That night, I was cruel. I thought I was better. But when Dad got sick and the hospital bills piled up and the world felt like it was falling apart, I realised something. All the money, all the parties, all the appearances, it doesn't protect you. Not really." Her voice cracked. "But people like you do. Soldiers do. And I mocked you for it." I was silent, my heart caught between old wounds and unexpected compassion. Finally, I said softly, "You can't change what happened that night. Neither can I. But you can change what you do tomorrow." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness," she whispered, "but I wanted to say I'm sorry." For the first time in years, the anger I carried toward her loosened its grip on me. I looked at her, not as the girl who mocked me, but as a woman finally humbled by life. "I forgive you," I said quietly. Her shoulders sagged, as if a weight had lifted. For a moment, we just stood there, the autumn wind carrying the scent of lilies through the air. And in that silence, I realised something powerful. Forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for me. Because the truth was, I didn't need her apology to know my worth. The general had reminded me. The flood victims had reminded me. The little boy at the wedding had reminded me. And every soldier who stood beside me had reminded me. But in forgiving her, I finally let go of the last piece of bitterness that chained me to that night. I walked away from the church that day with my head high, the sun warm on my face, and for the first time, peace in my chest. Now, years later, whenever I look back on that journey, from the cruel laughter to the salute, from the shame to the pride, from the bitterness to the forgiveness, I see it clearly. Life will test you in rooms filled with people who don't see you. They will laugh, they will mock, they will doubt. But those rooms are not your destiny. Your destiny lies in the lives you touch, in the people you protect, in the quiet respect that doesn't need chandeliers or applause. That's the real lesson I carry with me. So, if you're listening right now, hear me. Never let their laughter define you. Never let their silence break you. Stand tall, because the truth will always walk into the room, sometimes in the form of a general, sometimes in the form of a child, sometimes in the form of your own reflection in the mirror. And when it does, you will know that your worth was never in their approval. It was in the honour you carried all along. That is my story. That is my truth. And that is why, no matter where I go, I will always wear this uniform with pride. Because they mocked me once. But in the end, respect was mine to claim.